Hey everybody, welcome to another video. This one is not a review, but actually sort of a detour from what I've been doing lately. Those who've been following my channel can tell, I've been kind of devoting quite a bit of content to the painted Blood Rage board game and miniature set, done beautifully by Top Miniatures. And I do apologize for those of you who are not as interested in this. For better or for worse, I guess my channel kind of illustrates or sort of reflects some of my eclectic tastes. And so sometimes I have Walt Disney classic stuff, sometimes I have Star Wars stuff, sometimes I have statues of all different companies. And right now I'm sort of on a miniature kick. Fear not, I'm not a big miniature collector, but this is one of my favorite board games. I enjoyed the setting and the art design for this board game tremendously. And so I did put together this really expensive and massive project to get all of the miniatures painted professionally by Top Miniatures based in Europe. And I've done so far a couple of basic segments on the clans and showcasing some of the amazing work by the painter, Mina, in the Top Miniatures crew of artists. But here I wanted to take a little detour to talk about sort of another thing that we had to sort of overcome, which is when you have all these miniatures, monsters and clans, and like I said in my last videos, over 100 miniatures, not even including the 3D tokens. The obvious question that begs itself is, where are you going to put all of these things? Now, the package that comes with the board game, and this is the actual box itself. As you can see, the packaging that comes with the board game originally is unacceptable. It's just basically some plastic mold. It doesn't really protect at all. And bear in mind that all of these comes as unpainted plastic figurines. So when they first come out of the box, they're just soft. The spears are all bent into little crude U's, and you can literally throw all these miniatures in a big plastic bag and jostle them. However, obviously, for those who really love the game or play very often, a way of organizing them with inserts is the thing that makes the most sense. And so there's companies that have made quite a bit of good money customizing inserts. And what's an insert? It's basically little pieces of cardboard or wood that you kind of glue and build yourself, and it's a way of organizing all of your miniature pieces. And then you take all of these inserts, and that's what this is. These are inserts for you to insert them. So not only do you insert your pieces, but you insert them into the box, and they cunningly do it in such a fashion that you're supposed to be able to put all the varied pieces into one box. And then you're able to both store them and also transport them if you need to. And there's a lot of different solutions that are out there. The typical top of the line one in the United States is, God, I'm embarrassed I forgot, it's like broken token or something like that. And I have one of those. And this one here is from the Game Doctors, which is proprietary and it's not licensed. The broken token one I think is licensed. This one is not licensed, and they sell it from Europe, I believe in Germany. Okay. So here's the thing, however, to know about all these inserts. And I own both of them, and I did a pretty extensive review last year, if you want to check it out on my YouTube channel, on how how the broken token one at least is and how it functions. And the bottom line is this: if you are looking for a way to just put all of your pieces, including all of the Kickstarter exclusives and all of the cards, etc., in one box, but you don't care about the paint, in other words, it's unpainted miniatures, then I think both this as well as the broken tokens inserts are just amazing. Very good, very organized, and definitely makes preparing for the game and cleaning up after the game, where everything kind of goes where it belongs, a lot easier. But remember that once you've paid money to professionally paint these things, or even if you've devoted the time and the effort to paint it yourself, the standards become a lot higher. You can't have scenarios where you have the paint of your miniatures scratched or damaged, or have a mishap, chronic rubbing. You can't have that. It has to be really perfect. And the challenge, of course, is to put everything in that box over there. Sometimes the room for error is less than 1 millimeter. Like these things are really, really tight, really, really close together. And for both the broken token and the game doctor one, even at best, it's not really very good. For instance, the fire demon sword tip, which I'll show later, is just 1 millimeter too high, which you may not think is a big deal. And it isn't a big deal if the fire demon isn't, or the fire giant isn't painted. You slap, the actual board and the instruction manuals on top, and everything's fine. It's 1 millimeter, doesn't matter. But when it comes to painted miniatures, even a sub-millimeter mistake like that can matter, because over time you're going to damage that fire giant's sword. You're going to damage the tip of it. So these are all kind of significant issues. Okay. So as part of the project for Top Miniatures, I have bought the Game Doctor's insert because during my research on the internet, I thought that was maybe presented the best solution, and asked Top Miniatures to build it and then to maybe modify it to see what they can do to create a situation where you can not only store the complete set, but also protect the paint. And he did his best. He also not only did a wonderful job building these inserts, but he also spent a lot of time modifying them, sometimes dremeling or moving things around, trying to create a matrix where you can store all of these beautifully painted pieces without damage. And he started along that path and then ran into some challenges. And then when I got everything through the mail, I kind of had to analyze, and I modified some of his, kind of decisions to try to get things to all fit. It was extraordinarily challenging, very, very difficult. But after a lot of work, I think I did it. So I wanted to take a little break to sort of showcase how I put everything together and how he modified some of the pieces so that you can actually be playable. Okay, so let's start off with the monsters, actually. Okay, so here goes. This right here is supposed to go along the far end of the box. So remember, all of these inserts have to fit perfectly into this square box. That's all you got. So what you're seeing here is what's supposed to go against the one of the sides of the box. And understand that there are going to be some limitations because I have custom 3-dimensional tokens, whereas the original board game for those tokens were just little pieces of cardboard cutout, which I showed you in an earlier video. So the dream that every single thing from the board game is going to be able to be put into that box is already dead to begin with, because I have at least 18, 20 tokens that are 3D that do take up space, which no insert ever made can't really deal with, because the core of the original game, these 3-dimensional printed tokens were actually just little pieces of flat cardboard. But anyways, to begin with the monster problem, this is what it looks like at the very far end of one of the sides of the square, okay? And so this is where you're supposed to put your Ragnarok tokens, which I don't have. I have custom versions of that, which cannot fit in a board game box. I'll show you that a little bit later in a separate video. So this is where the core Ragnarok tokens are supposed to go. So once you punch them out of the cardboard, they're flat cardboard. It should fit very nicely here. This is a very nice card holder, which I'm continuing to use. There's a separate slot for the round 3, round 2, round 1. And even if you put the cards in nice cardboard sleeves to protect them from wearing, and even if you add all of the expansions from the 5th player expansion as well as the Mystics or Midgard, it all fits very comfortably. So this is a very nice card holder, which I'm going to continue to keep. Down here, you put the card holder on top like this, to give it the height, and then down below, this is where you're supposed to put your pillage tokens, which of course is completely useless to me because all of my pillage tokens are 3-dimensional, and so it will never fit here anyways. Okay, so this is not really very useful. I'm using in here where the ride and rock tokens should be. I'm putting some of the extra sleeves as well as some extra magnets that I've been using to make this work. More about that later, a little bit later on. And then this is actually the Game Doctor setup to deal with the large monsters that you have. Now, this insert is supposed to properly handle not only the core monsters, but also every single expansion, as well as all the Kickstarter exclusives as well. So therefore, there's supposed to be a space for the original 4 big monsters, which is the Ice Giant, the Fire Giant, the Troll, and the Sea Serpent. Those are the 4 bigger monsters, as well as the 3 Kickstarter exclusive big monsters, which is the Mountain Giant, and then Fenrir, and the Mystic Troll. So there's 7 big monsters to begin with, and if you count, you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay? So this is the original kind of creation, and then what Soren, who's the head of Top Miniatures, did, or instructed, is they put magnets, essentially, to lock the miniatures down. And this is a solution that we decided upon for essentially all of the minis, because again, when you have unpainted miniatures, you can just put them here, and if you jostle them, it doesn't matter because there's no paint, they're plastic, they're indestructible practically. But once you've covered the plastic in, say, hundreds of dollars worth of paint work, you can't afford for these now works of art to just simply jostle. That would damage the paint. So you have to find a way to immobilize them. And the best way we figured out is by applying these little tiny magnets. As you can see, they're barely 3 millimeters. And it's applying these magnets, essentially to both the bases of all of the minis, as well as now to these areas, so that it snaps the position and it prevents them from moving. And it's a fine line, because if you make that magnetic attraction too great, you can't move it out, and you're going to scratch trying to force it off. But you make it too loose, and they move a little bit, then obviously you've failed your purpose to begin with originally, right? Which is to avoid them moving. So if you put all of these magnets in place, and then you have to basically put the big monsters in. And from the very get-go, I ran into a big problem with that, because it was unbelievably tight. I mean, so tight that I did not feel like I could replicate putting it in such close quarters without, again, damaging the paint. And these big monster paint jobs, which I'm going to review for you pretty shortly, they're so beautiful and they cost the most. I obviously really didn't want to take the chance of damaging it. Not to mention the way these things were placed. If you lock them in position, remember the base of the monsters have about anywhere from 4 to 8 magnets, and now here you see 4 magnets yourself. The way they snap, they snap pretty tight. And there's just, if you were to look like this, there's little pieces of miniature hanging off, like, a little millimeter or 2 of hammer here or there. And again, the back of the Fire Giant is extending. And if you want all of this to fit in that box over there, even a millimeter will not do. A millimeter is way too big. And so I could not actually even put this into the box without, basically damaging the monsters, in my opinion. And so that created quite the conundrum. Problem number 1. Problem number 2, the Kickstarter exclusive comes with a 5th player expansion, and the 5th player expansion comes with its own little expansion where it delivers 3 extra monsters. So there's the core smaller monsters in the Blood Rage core set includes a Dark Elf, a Dwarf Chieftain, and a Soldier of Hell. Okay, so when you have more players, you need more monsters, right? You have to kind of have more cards, more monsters, because there's an extra player involved. And so in order to kind of balance the gameplay, they gave you another Soldier of Hell, another Dark Elf, another Dwarf Chieftain, right? And so that means there's 3 more miniatures, and these miniatures are distinct. They're not just doubles. There's not just a copy of a Dwarf Chieftain. They're completely different sculpts. and it's really difficult to find a place to put them. Broken, was it the broken token or whatever, or broken whatever? They tried one technique, which is imperfect, and the Game Doctor tried this technique where you put the 3 extra monsters in these grooves, and then you turn them upside down and you put them so they're hanging over the big monsters. Again, it works great in concept. If you look at their YouTube video, they show you how it's supposed to be done. It looks great. Unpainted, it looks great. Painted, where you can, again, ill afford any imperfection or any area where there's scratching or hitting each other, and this solution is not acceptable. Finally, one of the exclusives that was released much later was of another god of Asgard called Healy. And he came later, and so there was really no insert to deal with this extra god. Most of these inserts only have room for the original 6 gods. They do not have a place for Healy. So these are all sort of significant problems that I had to overcome. And then finally, if you're looking at the various tokens, this here, for instance, is supposed to be a flat, tiny little cardboard piece. They all are. All of these player tokens, like the little raven player token right over here, this guy, he's supposed to be just a little simple piece of flat cardboard. So all of these guys are supposed to be completely flat, and they take up, as you can see, a tremendous amount of space. If you look over here, these are my 3D painted 3D printed and professionally painted by Top Miniatures Pillage tokens. And again, for those who play the game, the Pillage tokens are these little tiny flat cardboard discs. So all of this stuff is supposed to have no profile, and you can see there's a significant profile because now I've kind of raised them from the 2D version to a 3D version. This is Yggdrasil, the tree, which again, on the original board game is a simple little small, maybe, centimeter by centimeter piece of cardboard. And now it's like a fully sculpted and beautifully painted model, which I will review in a separate segment. But this just sort of gives you a hint at like how you're going to get these extra ones also into that box. So, certain sacrifices had to be made, and the first priority, obviously, is to protect the paint, protect every single piece that was painted. And in the service of that means you had to sacrifice the space that you normally would reserve for the Ragnarok tokens and the game cards, as well as the actual instruction manual and the board itself. Which again is okay because these guys are not painted, you don't have to protect them. It does make, sort of carrying them around a little more inconvenient, but a place to truly get everything together was worth it. Okay, so how did I do it? Let's go and address the monsters first. So the first thing I had to do was essentially take this and throw it away, and take this and completely scrap it, despite all the good work that Soren did and all the effort in building it, as well as putting in these little tiny magnets. I had to basically completely throw that out. And the reason for this is because the give is so tight, you just cannot afford to waste all that space with those little walls. And also the magnet, these little 4 small magnets, is too restrictive. By restrictive, I mean that it snaps on too tight. You have to have more give. So my solution was actually to use this guy right here. Okay, so this is a magnetic strip. As you can see, it's extremely thick, 4 millimeters to be specific. There's adhesive on the back, and you're supposed to be able to hang this onto the wall and actually put metal like tools on it. If you say slap 3 of these together, you might be able to actually put on like a metal hammer or a screwdriver or something like this. So it's supposed to be able to hold quite a bit of weight. And the problem here with, by the way, magnetic paper, magnetic strips, is that the thinner the cardboard, the thinner the magnetic strip, the weaker the magnetism, the weaker the attraction. So, as you can see, These are the main monsters with a couple extras, which I'll get into a little bit later. But you can see there's the Sea Serpent, the Troll, the Mystic Troll, the Mountain Giant, Fire Giant, Ice Giant, and Fenrir. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 7 major big guns, the big monsters. And so what I did was I measured everything out. I put 2 of these together. I took a third and cut it in half. And I basically filled this line from here all the way to here. And I basically used adhesive to secure this 4mm thick magnetic strip and create an entire magnetic floor. And when you create an entire magnetic floor versus these tiny little magnets, you give yourself the ability to now give yourself some room. Now, as you can imagine, they're still very tight because of just great art, but also inconvenient art sometimes. You can see that a Sea Serpent, for instance, has a whole bunch of tendrils, and the Troll has his axe held out in an annoyingly space inefficient manner. You have the Fire Giant, even worse, with the tip of that sword all the way out, and you have the Ice Giant, of course, holding the snow-covered rock. So all of these guys have to sort of fit within this amount. And even though ditching the separators, the wall, gives you more space, it's still a little bit tight. But as you can, I hope, clearly appreciate, because the entire floor is magnetized, I can put these monsters anywhere I want. And I did it in a fashion where none of them are touching and all of them are nicely protected. It's still a little bit tight because Fenrir has nowhere to go. He has to be just at the edge. And you'll see when I put everything together how close it is. But I checked carefully, and again, you can move all of these monsters around little by little, and it's easy to do because, again, they're all magnetized. And the bottom of these monsters with the little tiny magnets about the size of this is enough that when you combine them with the thick magnetic floor, there's enough attraction where, as you can see, if you move it around, none of these guys move at all. They're pretty solid. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that if I turn this box upside down and shake it, that these guys won't move. But that's not what we need. We don't need that. We don't want that. As long as they keep in good position when I'm moving the box, that's all that counts. And in addition, I have extra magnets, which I can kind of glue to the bottom to give it a little bit more traction. I haven't done that yet because so far, I think this is pretty good. But I'll think about that. But you can always augment or supplement the magnets at the base to give a little bit stronger pull. But the key is you have to use the thick magnetic strip, because that gives you increased attraction, and that makes up for the small magnets on the base, so that everything works out really nicely. And it's important that the entire floor is all magnetized strip. So again, you have the option of moving things around. Now, within the space of that, once you've gotten rid of this, and once we've given up these guys, because remember, the original configuration is that you're supposed to use this space here by putting in your Pillage token, and then putting in your card box right here, and then putting your Ragnarok token box here. So all of this takes up a lot of space. Once you know that this is not going to go in a box, this is going to be thrown away, because you can see, by the way, that all these tokens are supposed to be little tiny cardboard pieces that only take up this much profile. You can see how challenging this is when the original insert only thought that this was going to be put in this, but this goes, and of course you know that this is not going to be there as well. Now you have actually this much space to work with, and that's a huge amount of space. That's the space that I actually used to create enough extra to properly and comfortably put all of these monsters, as well as to put the 3 extra monsters from the 5th player expansion, the extra Soldier of Hell, the extra Dark Elf, and the extra Dwarf Chieftain, who, by the way, has a very long spear. So long that this little guy is almost as difficult to package as a big monster. You can see with that extra space, I'm easily able to put these little tinier miniatures here and have them immobilized and protected, and then also have Healy the seventh god also locked in position. And worst comes to worst, I still have space. 1, 2, space for probably at least 2 more miniatures, maybe 3 if I move them around, if need calls for it. I don't think it will, but now I can see that this area becomes very comfortable for both the big monsters as well as the extra monsters, and even Healy. Finally, the problem of Healy now solved. Okay, so that I'm pretty happy about, and it works really, really nicely. And I can still augment again the big monsters with the very thin, maybe ½ inch rare earth. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So that's how I solved the monster problem, which is number 1. Now let's get to the clans. This was a huge problem as well for a couple of reasons. So now you can see that these are all these bases. The bases are color-coded for the clans that we're talking about. And as you can see, I have the miniatures permanently glued into these bases because they never change. The problem with that is if you permanently glue them to the base, that little base does add a little bit of height to the mini. And again, you can see how the original Game Doctor's insert, this is very similar, by the way, to the Broken Token inserts. You can see how tight all of these guys are. Normally, you have base separators along the bottom that you snap the miniatures into to hold them steady, and you don't have these bases, okay? Now, the problem with this, of course, is that when you have a beautifully painted miniature set like this, you can afford to just snap it into their separators. That will not do, that will destroy the base. Not to mention, you're creating bases. This is no longer just a simple plastic base. You've kind of built up the base. There's stone, there's earth, there's moss. And that thickens the base to the point where it can no longer fit into the base separators that were designed to keep the miniatures from moving, okay? And that's really important because you have to stack these trays. And so that means that none of what's in there can go above this line, or else you cannot stack them properly. So again, Top Miniatures tried to take care of the problem by using magnets, but they didn't go far enough. So what they did was they put magnetic paper, really magnetic strips cut to size into squares, and they adhese that. They use the adhesive to basically put it to the bottom, and then they hoped to use the little tiny magnets at the base to, along with the base separator, cause the miniatures to not move. So I give you an example. I'll take out one of the miniatures from the Ram clan. So look at the bottom. You can see that they have 4 small magnets, okay? Hopefully you can tell very easily from here. The 4 small magnets, hand drilled. Imagine the labor for all 100 of these to hand drill. And they're hoping that these 4 small magnets will then basically attract to the magnetic paper right here, and so that this guy doesn't move. But the key, of course, is that he had the base separators to help. And when I got it in and actually tried to put these miniatures in, it's impossible. You would destroy the bases. So what I had to do is for each one of these guys, in order to solve this problem, I actually then decided, okay, if the base separators are preventing all of these miniatures from fitting properly, they were jutting out, and also with potential threat to damage the miniatures, I had to just rip all of them out, which was difficult to do because they were glued in. So I did the work of ripping all of it out. You can see that. So I had to rip all of the miniatures out. I left only little tiny stubbles behind that don't directly touch my minis. And once I ripped them out, I now had the depth to, of course, put the miniature all the way in. So it wasn't too hard. You basically just do this. And as you can see, it fits very nicely. depending on, again, how well you do, you can make sure that this doesn't touch any of the other miniatures. The problem then came that if I did that, all these pieces were very weak. You just touch a little bit and they will all fall down, as if it was not magnetized at all. So the attraction between the magnetic paper and the small little magnets on the bases of the minis was obviously insufficient. So then the obvious solution to that problem is you have to have stronger attraction, okay? So that's when I thought, okay, we just need better magnetic paper, better magnetic strips. Well, that is easier said than done because that doesn't exist. You know, you look around, you search, and you realize that the limitation is the thickness. And so if you want more attraction, you want more magnetic attraction, you need to get thicker magnetic strips. But you can imagine clearly in this scenario, that's impossible. You take a 4 millimeters and you can't put these in there, it's too thick. You have to keep the thinness of that magnetic paper. That's still what's keeping everything fitting together. So if you cannot get thicker magnetic strips, and you still need more magnetism, what is the answer? The answer is you need to work on the minis, right? And so what I did was I actually went online and I bought neodymium rare earth magnet. These are, by the way, incredibly powerful magnets where even very small ones exert tremendous attraction. Just without without getting too much of a tangent, you got to be very careful working with those. Their attraction is so powerful. It can break things in the house. It can actually injure you. It can shear off, like a little piece of skin or finger. So they're not joking around. It's really, really dangerous. You have to be very careful with them. But luckily, I bought mine very, very small, and I was able to get through combination. I was able to get a perfect 1/2 inch diameter metal, so much bigger than 3 millimeters, full 1/2 inch. That's just perfectly fits the bottom, and I glued that super glue, okay? Glued it in place so it doesn't move, rock hard, and that provided enough attraction from the miniature side. Whereas you can see, I think when I was explaining to what I was doing, you can see that they're now very, very sturdy, where literally you can go upside down and they're not going to fall off. So that's good, very, very good. And it took a lot of time and effort to figure out the thickness and the diameter, and then of course gluing every one of them on that needed it. So that was sort of a pain. But I managed to do it for all of them, and I tore out the base, the base separators for every single one of these trays, and then again modified every single miniature with more rare earth magnetism to make sure that they're all going to stick very nicely. As you can see, they're so powerful they even stick to each other or repel each other. You see that? So that is one of the things that is one of the unfortunate side effects, is that when all of the miniatures have the magnets, sometimes you put them together on the game board, they may stick together a little bit because the magnet in the base is so strong. But that is the price that, of course, we sometimes have to pay in order to make sure that they're actually being stored correctly. And it doesn't really detract too much from gameplay because it only happens if it's very tight quarters and they're right next to each other. So that was the very long sort of journey to solve the clan, the proper way of storing the clans. And even with that solution, it takes a long time to perfectly place each and every one of these different members. The clan leader, the 2 mystics, the 2 different types of soldiers, in various ways. Sometimes you have to put them on the side, sometimes you have to put them with their back facing out to make sure that nothing touches each other. Now luckily, of course, all these minis have been sealed with a very strong coat of lacquer and varnish. So they're meant to be handled, you can touch them, and they don't chip easily. So gentle touching, okay, but still you want to maximize the space between each one. That's what these inserts are for. Okay, so that's how I solved that problem. Very, very difficult. And with that solved, things became a little bit more easy because now you realize everybody is flat. So now I'm going to start putting all of these inserts into the box. Okay, so we solved the monster problem, and then we solved the clan insert problem, and then I'll show you what to do with the profiles of all these tokens, okay? And there was one more wrinkle that I'm going to show you. So here's what you do. You take the insert where you put the monsters. Here's the werewolf, which is a Kickstarter exclusive. You can see the Valkyrie, and you can see how her spear has to be right in that little groove. There's actually a little notch for her spear to go so that nothing touches. And then, of course, the original Soldier of Hell Dwarf Chieftain and Dark Elf, as well as the Volar Witch. So this is the monster tray. No modification needed. You go over here, and then you put it on like this. Okay, and then we're going to slide it all the way down, just like so. As you can see, there is a little bit of give, probably about 1 millimeter that goes back and forth. So that's where we're going to go right here. Okay, and you see I kind of measure perfectly where that magnetic floor is going to end. So step one. And this, of course, no miniature is jutting out above the line here. Okay. Which means that the height of the minis are below the height of the wood. It's very important. And of course, they're all protected so that they're not actually going to rub. They're all magnetized as well. So all of these, as you can see, are magnetized. There's magnetic paper at the bottom, and that level of magnetism is appropriate because they're just standing. You're not asking them to be turned upside down. It's strong enough that they're not going anywhere. Next order of business, you take the Gods of Asgard, and that goes right on top, just like that. Okay? And as you can see, there's 6 Gods of Asgard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they're sitting right there. The way that they're placed, there's actually no way to put the board against this ridge without hitting some of these guys. Luckily, we don't have to do that. So the Gods of Asgard and the small monsters are protected, the big monsters are protected, and the alternative small monsters are protected, and Healy is protected, all immobilized, not moving. Okay? Okay, so now, normally, at this point, you're going to be putting these guys, okay, down first, and then you put the trays over them. I'm going to do it backwards, and you'll see why. So first of all, be careful. There is actually difference in width. You can see that this is a little bit wider. The wider ones are for the Raven and the Wild Boar because they require a little bit more space. The Raven is one of the hardest clans to put in safely. They all have long spears, very difficult to put it in without too much touching. But if you take your time and experiment, you can do it. So this guy goes down first, and we're going to put it in the center, just like that. And then we'll slide it all the way down, like that. Okay? Okay, second, we now have the thinner box. We're going to put that at the bottom as well. And then slide that in, just like that. And then the final one, and it doesn't matter which one, I'm just going to choose, we'll just choose the Wolf Clan, for instance. Ooh, hold on a second. I made a little bit of a mistake. It's hard to do with one hand, by the way. So we're going to raise it up. I always try to put the orientation with the ship square facing up. So let's do that. As you can see, it's so close to Fenrir's nose, but you have a millimeter to spare, you do it right, it will not touch anything on the monster side, okay? Nothing at all. Look at the give, we got about a millimeter or 2 of space, okay? And then last but not least, we will put in the Wolf Clan. Just will slowly put it in. Okay, good. So now the bottom clans are in place. Also low profile. No piece of miniature is above this line here, so nothing's jutting out, okay? So now we put the next level up. Wild boar, very specifically, I'm gonna put the wild boar in this orientation, and then we're going to put it above the Raven Clan tray. The ship space is here, here. Why did I put this opposite? There's a critical reason for that, which I will show you soon. And then, of course, the next two trays. Put that on top. And then last but not least, the ram tray. We're going to put this just like this. Okay, so now, with all the clans in place, you can see again that Fenrir's nose is not touching, and we have a little bit of space, okay? So far, none of the painted miniatures are touching. I've already checked all of the placements here, and sometimes we're talking sub-millimeter, a quarter of a millimeter distance. The distance of 2 pieces of paper, okay? But the strong rare earth magnets I added, the strip, the orientation, almost without exception, they don't touch. Okay, no mini touches any other mini where the paint can't scratch each other off. You can see they are close, very close. Okay, look at these, look at the give. Okay, some of them easier than others, but others very, very difficult. Okay, so what is the deal with this wild boar? This wild boar clan problem. Why did I reverse and put the ship here? Okay, very simple reason actually. Simple reason, but difficult solution. The reason is there is a miniature of the wild boar that's running. And we've already reviewed that, so you know what that is. Okay, when you paint it, you make it beautiful, make that base beautiful. I mentioned before in my other review, you have to cut the miniature off. They're all plastic, it's attached to the base. The base is a piece of plastic. So in order to obviously work on the base, you have to cut the miniature off so you can paint the miniature, then you paint and you build the base, and then you glue the figure onto the base. Now, for most of them, as you can see, it's pretty obvious where you have to go with them. You know, look at the Serpent Clan, for instance. You know, it's pretty obvious where they go because they're standing. Look at the Bear Clan. Look at the feet spread eagled. But for the wild boar, because he's running, look at this guy. Because he's running and there's only attached to one leg, you have a lot of options where you want to put that leg. And, you know, when they put it together, they were off by a couple millimeters on 1 or 2 of them, such that there is no way to put this guy without having his cape jutting above the level of the box, okay, of the edge. Impossible. So even though the purple here is below the level of the box, the cape is jutting up. And no matter what I tried, I could not take care of that problem. And so you have, kind of a difficult choices. One choice, of course, is you basically snap him off the base and reposition him, and then camouflage. Now that is a little bit beyond my ability, and I do not like the idea of doing that, because now you create a crack and you have to, try to mess with it. I didn't want to do that. So what is the way? Well, we are very lucky. I'll show you as we begin to continue placing elements. So here's a tray, one tray, and this tray goes at the bottom. So I'll put it like this, okay? This is the final layer. So we put this here, and then there's another tray. This is the tray, by the way, that I put my 3D player tokens and also the pillage token. You can see very nice ruins right there. And you can see that there is an interesting little U-shape. Now, I don't know why the game doctors made this U-shape. They must have had a reason for it. Maybe it served a purpose for their original design. But here, this gap is actually perfect. And if I put it here like this, you can see that that gap is perfect for the one soldier whose cloak is just about 2 to 3 millimeters above the edge. You see that? So that's why I had to orient the Wild Boar Clang in a very specific orientation to make use of the gap on this particular insert. So that makes up for the rather unfortunate mishap of putting his running foot a little bit too far to the edge so that we could not get him underneath the borders of his own tray. So we do that, and now we're almost done. Each of these trays are actually separate. There's 6 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and these little trays were meant for you to put your cardboard player tokens, as well as your glory markers, etc. And every player has this little tiny thing, I guess. Obviously, we don't need to use that, and so I basically use it to put the, of course, the player tokens, but there's extra spaces now, because we have changed things around, and they're not extra spaces for me to put all of the 3D pillage tokens, of which there are 9. You can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They have a lot of, they're not low profile, very high profile indeed. You can see they're definitely above the edge of the box, but I use this space like that. And I glued each of these boxes together so that they're one piece, because it makes it easier to put here. And you have to glue them because when you put them on there, you have support here, a little bit thicker support here, and support here. If you don't glue, the side box will droop and hit the miniature, okay? But if you glue it, then of course, the glue is what actually supports everything, and it comes together beautifully, just like so. And up here, of course, you didn't need to glue because these squares hold the little squares here very nicely, but I glued it anyway for convenience. And you put that here like this. And as you can see, this is it. Perfect, okay? And you look at the bottom, gap. None of these guys touch each other. These guys are all set up perfectly. Nothing touches, everything is set. Every single miniature is done. And here are the 3D versions of the tokens. Yeah, as you can see, you have the Age token, the First Player token, and the Doom token. All of the 3D player tokens, and then the 3D pillage tokens, as well as the pillaged token. And there's there's an extra one as well. And then you have the 3D glory markers here. So you can put that here. That helps. And then finally, even though all of these guys are sticking above the level, because we're not putting the board on here, because we're not going to put this in the box, and this cannot go in the box, we sacrifice that. Because we don't have to worry about that, and we make this the top layer rather than the bottom layer. Remember, normally the original insert, this is the bottom layer. But now you see we've made this the top layer because we've done a perfect job in the clan trays to make it completely flat. We don't care if our 3D tokens stick up over the edge, because guess what? There's nothing that's going to touch it anyways. And all that you have to do now is you take the lid and you put the lid on top. The only thing I have to do is I have to take this and then move it down a little bit which is fine. Eventually I won't have to. But when you remove the box lid from here, it creates this suction. And the suction, for whatever reason, actually sucks this piece, no other piece, just this piece, it sucks it up. The way to solve that, by the way, is you drill a hole. You drill a hole here, you drill a hole here, and that will actually vent so that there's no suction. I'll do that at a later time, at which point I can have this upright again. But to prevent it from being sucked up, I just put it down here. And then, as you can see, all you have to do is you put it over, like so. And you just sort of gently go down. Just like that. And so now, every single painted miniature from this huge project is safely magnetized, held immobile in one box. You still have a board game and instructions, which is simple enough. You put that here like that. There's a big Ziploc bag. Eventually you could put, of course, the Ragnarok tokens in here as well. I have kind of a cool version of those, which I'll show later. But you put that in here, and so you bring it around like this. Very nice. And then let's not forget, you also have to bring your cards. And then this is not really part of it, but this is an extra, so I put it here like so. So not quite as neat as everything in the box, but again, you're dealing with tremendously expensive and wonderfully painted miniatures. You have to make that the first priority. So that's how you store over 100 separately painted pieces and protect them. A lot of modification, a lot of work, a lot of thinking to try to get through all of these challenges, and you have to make compromises. But again, I'm really happy with the result, and I made this long, hour-long video not only to sort of show the process, but for some of you who might be trying to struggle through the same thing, this is one idea. And you can do the same thing, by the way, with the broken token version. It just requires same thing, magnetization, ingenuity, deciding how to magnetize, how strong the magnets need to be, how big, the thinness. You have to use neodymium, you have to use the rare earth, because you're dealing with such small magnets that you need that extra, quality from the neodymium, from the rare earth, to create the magnetic force from such a small thing. So you need that, but the broken token, you can do, I think, very similar thing. But you have to sacrifice, because if you want those beautiful three-dimensional custom pillage tokens, they take up room. You have 3D even Doom token, which comes from the Kickstarter stuff. They take up room, and the core inserts do not deal with that. They assume that those are going to be flat cardboard pieces. So you have to sacrifice and give up something. And if you want to perfectly protect all of those miniatures, you have to create some room, like I did for this. And what do you do with this? It gets thrown away. This gets thrown away. And of course, this gets thrown away. I may repurpose the magnets for some other work, but in essence, they're gone. So again, I hope you sort of enjoyed, or maybe it was very boring, that you can use this video to help you fall asleep. But I hope you enjoyed kind of a little glimpse into the challenges of trying to fit together all of these things together. It's pretty fascinating. It's interesting for those of you who collect this type of thing. And I know very few people actually spend the time, by the way, actually either professionally having these miniatures professionally painted, because it's very expensive and time consuming, or they themselves paint, which is more time consuming. And so when you're talking about minis, even these little tiny miniatures, if you want to protect them, they do take up space. I mean, one of them doesn't take up a lot of space. 110, 120 is a whole different ballgame. And so finding these solutions, I think, had a lot of relevance. And this is just one particular technique to solve the problem. So again, I hope you enjoyed that process, leading you through it. And then the next segment, we get back to reviewing the beauty of the individual miniatures. Now that I'm finally able to put all of them in one place. So quite happy about that. I just took care of that the last couple of days. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed it and do take care.